Welcome to today's episode of the VybeShift Podcast, entitled, I Feel Like Everything Depends on Me. Introduction. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from having too much to do. It comes from believing that too much depends on you. You may be the person everyone calls, the person who remembers, the person who fixes, the person who anticipates what could go wrong before anyone else notices that there might be a problem. You might carry the finances, the family, the business, the emotional temperature of the room, the future, the plans, the contingencies, the things nobody else seems to notice. And somewhere along the way, responsibility quietly stops being something you have and starts becoming someone you are. You become the dependable one, the strong one, the capable one, the person who can handle it. And perhaps people admire you for it. Perhaps they appreciate you for it. Perhaps you have even built much of your identity around being that person. But there's a question underneath all of that competence that we rarely ask. What happens to you when you begin to believe that everything depends upon you? Because there's a difference between being responsible and being responsible for everything. There's a difference between contributing and carrying. There is a difference between leadership and believing the entire structure collapses if you stop holding it upright. And today, that is where we're going. Not toward becoming less responsible, not toward abandoning the people or things that matter to us, but toward examining the invisible weight we may have been carrying for a longer time than we realize. Welcome to the VybeShift Podcast. Let's begin. Part 1. When responsibility becomes identity. If I don't do it, who will? Perhaps you know that sentence. Maybe you have even said it recently. If I don't do it, who will? On the surface, it sounds practical. And sometimes it is. There are genuinely moments when responsibility belongs to us. There are commitments we have made, people who depend upon us, promises worth keeping, problems that require our attention. VybeShift is not about pretending those realities don't exist, but sometimes beneath the practical question, if I don't do it, who will, there's another belief hidden. Nobody else can be trusted to carry this. And underneath that belief may be another. I cannot allow anything to fall apart. And underneath that may be something deeper still. My safety depends on keeping everything under control. Now we are no longer simply talking about responsibility. We are talking about identity. We are talking about a person whose nervous system may have learned that vigilance equals safety, whose value may have become connected to usefulness, whose sense of belonging may have become connected to being needed. And this is why simply telling someone like this to relax rarely helps, because relaxation feels irresponsible, rest feels dangerous, delegation feels risky, saying no feels selfish, and stepping away can create more anxiety than continuing to carry the burden. The competence trap. One of the strangest things about being highly capable is that competence can become its own trap. You solve problems quickly, so people bring you more problems. You stay calm during emergencies, so people rely on you during emergencies. You notice what needs doing, so eventually everyone assumes you will notice. You follow through, so unfinished things naturally migrate toward you. And none of this necessarily begins maliciously. Often it happens gradually. Your capacity becomes reliability. Reliability becomes expectation. Expectation becomes responsibility. Responsibility becomes identity. Until eventually you are no longer simply a person who can handle things. You become the person who believes you must. And there is a subtle but profound difference between those two positions. I can handle this contains choice. I must handle this contains captivity. When being needed feels like being valuable. There can also be something emotionally rewarding about being needed, and this is worth exploring gently, because sometimes being indispensable feels like proof that we matter. People call us because we know what to do. People rely on us because we come through. People appreciate us because we can make difficult situations easier, and that can feel good. It can feel meaningful. It can even feel like love. But there's a difficult question underneath it. Would I still know that I mattered if nobody needed anything from me today? That question can feel uncomfortable, because if our sense of worth has quietly become attached to usefulness, then letting go of responsibility can feel like letting go of identity itself. Who am I if I'm not fixing something? Who am I if somebody else takes care of it? Who am I if I'm not the strongest person in the room? Who am I if I simply exist without proving my value through effort? These are not small questions. The invisible mental load. And then there's the responsibility nobody sees, the mental load. You may not physically be doing something every moment, but your mind is constantly managing. Did that bill get paid? Did they remember the appointment? What happens next month? What if this doesn't work? Who needs to be called? Who are we forgetting? What happens if that person doesn't follow through? What is plan B? What is plan C? What if I stop thinking about this and something gets missed? And so, even moments that look like rest from the outside are not actually rest. The body may be sitting on the couch, but internally you are still managing the command center. And that is exhausting, because human beings were never designed to remain psychologically on call every waking moment. Hyper-responsibility. Sometimes what looks like admirable responsibility is actually hyper-responsibility. Hyper-responsibility says, I need to anticipate everyone's needs. I need to prevent disappointment. I need to keep things functioning. I need to make sure everybody is okay. I need to solve the problem before it becomes a problem. I need to keep everybody happy. I need to know what happens next. I need to make sure nothing falls through the cracks. And perhaps the most exhausting belief of all, I am responsible for outcomes I cannot actually control. The last one changes everything, because responsibility without limits becomes impossible. You can influence outcomes, you can prepare, you can communicate, you can act wisely, but you cannot control every variable. You cannot control other people. You cannot control timing. You cannot control the economy. You cannot control how somebody reacts. You cannot control every unexpected event. You cannot control life. And yet, many of us live as though we are somehow failing whenever reality refuses to cooperate with our plans. Maybe you aren't tired because you're weak. Maybe you're tired because you have been mentally holding the roof up. Maybe you have been standing beneath everything you care about, arms extended overhead, believing, if I move, if I rest, if I stop paying attention, if I let somebody else handle this, the whole thing might come crashing down. And perhaps nobody has ever told you. You were never supposed to hold the entire roof. Maybe some things genuinely belong to you, but perhaps some things belong to other people. Some things belong to time. Some things belong to circumstances. And some things simply belong to life. The first vibe shift is not dropping responsibility. It is recognizing where responsibility actually begins and ends. Reflection questions for part 1. Reflection question number 1. Where in your life have you begun believing, consciously or unconsciously, that everything depends on you? Reflection question number 2. What responsibilities are genuinely yours, and which ones have you absorbed simply because you are capable of carrying them? Reflection question number 3. How much of your sense of worth has become connected to being useful, dependable, or needed? And reflection question number 4. What do you fear might happen if you stopped holding everything quite so tightly? Part 2. The cost of carrying everything. The strong one gets tired too. There's a strange loneliness that can come when being the person everyone thinks is strong. When people see you as capable, they may stop asking you whether you need help. And sometimes you stop asking also. You think, I'll figure it out. I always do. Just get through this week. Just get through this deadline. Just get through this financial pressure. Just get everyone settled. Just solve this problem. Then I'll rest. But the finish line keeps moving. There's always another situation, another responsibility, another person who needs something, another unexpected expense, another decision, another fire. And I'll rest when things settle down can quietly become a life philosophy. Except things rarely settle down for long, so you keep carrying. When responsibility becomes resentment. Eventually, something interesting may happen. The person who proudly carried everything starts feeling resentment toward the very people they chose to carry. You think, why am I the only person thinking about this? Why doesn't anyone else notice? Why do I have to remind everyone? Why do I have to be so responsible? Why does everyone come to me? Why can't somebody take care of me for once? And then perhaps guilt follows the resentment. Because you love these people, you care about the work, you want to help, so you judge yourself for feeling irritated. But resentment is often information. It may be telling you that an invisible boundary has been crossed. It may be saying, I am carrying something I no longer consent to carry. Or, I'm giving more than I sustainably have available. Or, I am doing for others what they may need to learn to do for themselves. That does not mean every resentment is justified, but it is worth listening to. Control can disguise itself as care. Here's another uncomfortable possibility. Sometimes we carry everything because we care deeply, but sometimes care and control can be intertwined. We say, I just want to make sure it gets done correctly. I'm trying to help. It's easier if I do it myself. I know how this works. I don't want them to struggle. All understandable, but there are moments when helping too much prevents other people from developing their own capacity. Think about that. If you always remember for someone, they never have to learn to remember. If you always rescue them from consequences, they never have to develop responsibility. If you always solve the problem, they never discover that they can solve problems. If you constantly manage everybody else's emotional comfort, they never learn that discomfort can be survived. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is allow someone else to carry what belongs to them, even if they carry it differently than we would, even if they make mistakes, even if watching them struggle feels uncomfortable. You are paying for every responsibility you carry. Every responsibility has a cost, not necessarily money, attention, energy, time, emotional bandwidth, mental bandwidth, presence, creativity, sleep, joy. There is no such thing as carrying an unlimited number of responsibilities without paying for them somewhere. And often the payment appears in places we don't immediately connect to the burden. Perhaps you become impatient. Perhaps you lose interest in things you once enjoyed. Perhaps everything begins to feel like another obligation. Perhaps you stop being fully present with the people you love because your mind is already managing tomorrow. Perhaps creativity disappears. Perhaps curiosity disappears. Perhaps play disappears. Perhaps you begin disappearing. And then one day you might say, I don't feel like myself anymore. Not because your true self vanished, but because responsibility has occupied every available room inside of you. The fantasy of perfect control. There's another illusion hidden beneath hyper-responsibility. If I work hard enough, prepare enough, worry enough, plan enough, and stay vigilant enough, I can keep bad things from happening. But life does not make that agreement with us. You can do everything correctly and still encounter difficulty. You can make wise financial decisions and still face an unexpected expense. You can love somebody beautifully and still lose the relationship. You can take care of your body and still become ill. You can build a strong business and still face changing circumstances. You can plan carefully and still be surprised. This does not mean planning is useless. It means planning has limits. Responsibility is powerful. Control is largely imaginary. And freedom begins when we stop confusing the two. Caring versus participating. Imagine replacing this sentence, "Everything depends on me," with "I have a part to play." Feel the difference. Everything depends on me versus I have a part to play. The first puts you at the center of the entire universe. The second places you inside the universe. You participate, you contribute, you respond, you choose, you care, you act. But you do not have to control the entire outcome. You do your part, others do theirs. Life does what life does, and then you respond again. This creates an entirely different relationship with responsibility. What would love do now? This is where a powerful question becomes useful. What would love do now? Not fear, not obligation, not guilt, not habit, not the identity of being the person who fixes everything. Love. Sometimes love says, yes, help them. Sometimes love says, no, this belongs to them. Sometimes love says, stay. Sometimes love says, step away. Sometimes love says, do everything you can. Sometimes love says, you have done enough for today. Sometimes love says, trust them. Sometimes love says, trust yourself. And sometimes love says, trust life. That last one may be the hardest, because trusting life means admitting that we cannot guarantee every outcome. But strangely, that admission does not make us powerless. It makes our power more precise. We stop wasting enormous amounts of energy trying to control what was never ours to control. And we become much more available for the things that actually are ours. Reflection questions for part 2. Reflection question number 1. Where has responsibility begun turning into resentment, depletion, or emotional distance in your life? Reflection question number 2. Are there people you may unintentionally be preventing from developing their own capacity because you keep carrying what belongs to them? Reflection question number 3. What has caring so much been costing you, mentally, emotionally, physically, relationally, and creatively? And reflection question number 4. If you replaced "everything depends on me" with "I have a part to play," what immediately feels different? Part 3. Putting down what was never yours to carry. Responsibility without self-abandonment. The answer is not irresponsibility. It is not walking away from everything. It is not becoming indifferent. The transformation is learning how to remain deeply responsible without abandoning yourself in the process. Because responsibility is beautiful when it comes from choice. It becomes destructive when it becomes identity. There are responsibilities that belong to you. Your choices, your integrity, your effort, your boundaries, your communication, your response to what happens, your willingness to learn, your willingness to repair when necessary, your willingness to act when action is required. But there are things that do not belong to you. Other people's reactions, other people's choices, other people's growth, other people's emotions. Whether everyone understands you, whether everyone approves of you, whether everything unfolds according to plan. Those things are outside your jurisdiction. And every time you try to govern territory that does not belong to you, you exhaust yourself. Let people carry their own backpack. Imagine hiking with several people. Every person has a backpack. Now imagine that every time someone becomes uncomfortable, you take something from their backpack and put it into yours. At first, perhaps it feels generous. You are strong. You handle it. So you take another item and another and another. Eventually, everyone else is walking comfortably and you can barely move. Then you begin wondering why nobody appreciates how much you're carrying. But perhaps the deeper question is, why did you keep accepting what belonged to someone else's backpack? Love does not necessarily mean carrying another person's load forever. Sometimes love means reminding them you are stronger than you think. You can carry this. I will walk beside you, but I will not carry it for you. That distinction can transform relationships. Another imperfection. One of the most practical ways to stop carrying everything is to allow other people to do things imperfectly. That sounds simple. It isn't. Especially when you know how you could do it faster, better, more efficiently. But if every delegated responsibility must be performed exactly the way you would perform it, delegation is not really delegation. It is control with assistance. Let somebody else find their way. Let them solve it differently. Let them occasionally forget. Let them learn. Let them experience the natural consequences of not preparing. Let the world continue turning even when you're not supervising it. You may discover something surprising. Things might not collapse. Creating a new internal question. When you encounter a new problem, instead of automatically asking, how am I going to fix this? Try asking, is this actually mine? That simple question creates space. Is this my responsibility? Is this partly my responsibility? Is this someone else's responsibility? Is this something nobody can control? Then ask, what is mine to do right now? Not everything that might need to happen, not the entire situation, just your part. Right now. Perhaps your part is making a phone call. Perhaps your part is having a conversation. Perhaps your part is creating a boundary. Perhaps your part is researching options. Perhaps your part is waiting. Perhaps your part is trusting someone. Perhaps your part is doing nothing today. There is tremendous freedom in becoming precise about responsibility. You don't have to earn rest. Another belief often accompanies hyper-responsibility. I can rest when everything is done. But everything is never done. There will always be another email, another task, another problem, another possibility, another need. So if rest must be earned through completion, you may never believe you deserve it. Rest cannot be the reward you receive when life finally stops needing you. Rest is part of being alive. So is play. So is joy. So is curiosity. So is doing something with absolutely no productive value whatsoever. There is an entire person underneath all of the roles you fulfill. That person needs room to breathe. Becoming available to life again. When you stop carrying everything, something begins returning. Presence. Instead of constantly living 5 steps ahead, you begin inhabiting the step you are actually standing on. You notice your surroundings. You hear people when they speak. You taste your food. You laugh more easily. You become curious again. You begin noticing possibilities where you before only saw obligation. And perhaps that is one of the greatest shifts available to us. Moving from life is something I must constantly manage to life is something I must constantly manage to life is something I am allowed to participate in. That is a completely different existence. You are not the entire machinery. Imagine standing beside an enormous machine with thousands of gears. You are one gear, an important gear perhaps. Your movement matters, your presence matters, your contribution matters, but you are not the entire machine. You were never meant to be. Life contains other people, other forces, other possibilities, other resources, other paths, other hands, other forms of intelligence, and perhaps one of the deepest expressions of truth is allowing some of those things to work without your constant intervention. You can care deeply without giving everything. You can love deeply without fixing everyone. You can lead without controlling every outcome. You can be dependable without being permanently available. You can contribute without sacrificing yourself. And you can matter enormously without everything depending upon you. The deeper vibe shift. Maybe the real shift is this: from everything depends upon me to something is mine to do. From I have to hold everything together to I will faithfully carry what is mine. From if I let go, everything might fall apart, to I am willing to discover what continues without my control. And perhaps most importantly, from I matter because people need me to I matter before I do anything at all. When that truth begins to settle in, responsibility changes. You stop carrying life as though it were a burden balanced across your shoulders, and you begin walking alongside it, participating, responding, choosing, trusting, living. Reflection questions for part 3. Reflection question number 1. What are you carrying right now that may actually belong in someone else's backpack? Reflection question number 2. Where could you allow someone else to do something differently or imperfectly without stepping in to take control? Reflection question number 3. When you ask what is actually mine to do right now, what becomes clear? And reflection question number 4. Who might you become if your life was no longer organized around being the person who holds everything together? Closing. You are allowed to come back to yourself. If you've spent years being the person everyone depends on, pulling down even a little amount of responsibility can feel strange. You might feel guilt. You might feel anxiety. You may even feel temporarily lost. Because when you have spent so much of your life asking, what does everyone need from me? You may no longer know how to answer another question. What do I need? And that may be where your next vibe shift begins. Because sometimes carrying everything from everyone else slowly separates us from ourselves. We become so accustomed to being the provider, the problem solver, the leader, the caregiver, the responsible one, the dependable one, that eventually we look in the mirror and quietly realize, I don't feel like myself anymore. If that sentence lands somewhere deep inside you, I created Vibe Shift Solving Process number 6, I don't feel like myself anymore, for exactly that place. It is not about becoming some entirely new version of yourself. It's about beginning the journey back toward the person who may have gotten buried beneath responsibility, expectation, pressure, roles, and years of taking care of everyone else. So if today's conversation stirred something in you, VSP number 6 may be the next place to go. And until next time, perhaps carry one question with you. What would love do now? Maybe love would solve the problem. Maybe love would make the call. Maybe love would show up. But maybe love would put something down and discover that the world keeps turning. You are allowed to be a part of life without carrying all of it. I'll meet you again next time on the VybeShift Podcast.